helps us understand what he's really dealing with. That he's trying to calm down and he's choosing that road before surgery. It's a smart thing to do, even if he's missing a couple slams.
Sinner is collecting trophies while Alcaraz is watching from outside the court. Sinner, another Wimbledon title. Ferrero, a warning about motivation. Alcaraz, a wrist recovery with no comfortable timeline. Now a tennis expert finally reveals why this matters today. The debate starts with Alcaraz saying that he no longer focuses on winning, at least as fans understood his ambition. That wording sounds healthy until it meets Ferrero's concern. Motivation can disappear, and discipline must then carry the player. Nobody should blame one quote for an injury. The easy explanation also ignores what Sinner has done during Carlos's absence. This situation feels different because joy has always powered Alcaraz's tennis. His smile creates freedom, variety, and courage under pressure. Remove that emotional fuel and the philosophy can sound less like balance and more like a warning. For a player who became the youngest man to complete the career Grand Slam, this is the most alarming sign yet because his greatest rival keeps moving while his competitive identity faces its hardest test. I genuinely want to know your first reaction, so subscribe and tell me whether this sounds like maturity or lost hunger. Now let us examine what Alcaraz actually said and what everyone conveniently removed. The missing context begins with a distinction that became almost invisible once the quote started traveling online. Alcaraz did not announce that victory had stopped mattering to him. He said he was not obsessed with becoming the best player in the world. He also explained that results could not become the only measure of his life. Those are not identical positions, although they became interchangeable once fans placed them beside the Ibiza scenes from his Netflix documentary. Carlos has always spoken about tennis in emotional terms. He needs to feel free, enjoy the competition, and express himself through the choices he makes with the racket. That instinct explains the drop shots at dangerous moments, the sudden visits to the net, and the forehands aimed at lines other players would avoid. His tennis does not emerge from caution. It grows through confidence, curiosity, and the belief that a difficult shot can change the mood of an entire stadium. That approach has already produced 7 major championships. It made him the youngest man to complete the career Grand Slam after his Australian Open victory in 2026. Nobody reaches that position without caring deeply about results. The controversy exists because Alcaraz also wants a life that is not completely controlled by those results. The moment that exposed this conflict came through Carlos Alcaraz, My Way. Cameras followed him during the 2024 season, capturing enormous victories alongside private discussions about the future. Alcaraz spoke about enjoying his youth. Juan Carlos Ferrero and agent Albert Molina looked at the same situation from another direction. They understood that Carlos wanted to sit beside the greatest players in history, but they also knew the cost attached to that ambition. The documentary showed the gap without resolving it. Carlos wanted greatness on terms that allowed him to remain happy. Ferrero believed historic achievement required sacrifices that could not always feel enjoyable. Neither position was absurd. The problem was that only one of them fitted the traditional image of a champion. Then social media entered the story. Clips of Alcaraz discussing Ibiza, freedom, and happiness moved faster than the longer conversations about training or pressure. Viewers who already considered Sinner the more disciplined player treated those moments as confirmation. Carlos became the naturally gifted celebrity. Yannick became the tireless professional. A complicated documentary about a young athlete was reduced to a contest between pleasure and work. That simplification had power because it matched the public identities of both players. Alcaraz smiles after producing a ridiculous winner. Sinner usually resets his expression and prepares for the next point. Carlos creates the impression that tennis is being invented in front of him. Yannick makes the sport look as though every possible outcome has already been studied. Their differences became more important once their rivalry moved beyond individual matches. Alcaraz owned the greater variety and often found ways to disturb Sinner's rhythm. Sinner answered by improving the parts of his game that opponents had once targeted. His serve became more reliable. His movement developed. The drop shot appeared more frequently. Each adjustment made him less dependent on one winning pattern. Sinner's progress created a harsh standard for every decision Alcaraz made away from the court. A holiday became evidence of reduced hunger. A difficult loss became the supposed price of celebrity. One statement about happiness was interpreted as a confession. The rivalry had reached a point where neither player could make an ordinary choice without it being measured against the other. Ferrero's later warning gave that debate a sharper edge. He said the only thing capable of stopping Alcaraz was a loss of motivation. His full point mattered. Talent was not the concern, physical ability was not the concern, mental strength was not presented as missing. Ferrero believed discipline would need to take control whenever motivation weakened. That idea is familiar inside elite sport. Motivation changes because it depends on emotion, novelty, and immediate rewards. Discipline keeps a player working when those rewards disappear. The first years of a great career offer constant milestones. A first major title changes a life. Reaching number one creates history. Defeating an established legend brings global attention. Repeating those achievements requires a different kind of fuel. Alcaraz reached those milestones unusually early. He won the US Open and became world number one as a teenager. He defeated Novak Djokovic in a 5-set Wimbledon final before turning 21. He added Roland Garros, defended Wimbledon, regained the US Open crown, and eventually completed his collection in Australia. The sport gave him almost every reward before most players enter their prime. Ferrero understood the danger hidden inside that success. Once every childhood dream has been touched, the next training session must be powered by something deeper than discovery. Carlos believes happiness can provide that power. His former coach placed greater trust in discipline. Their disagreement was never simply about a holiday. It concerned the mechanism that would carry Alcaraz through the next decade. The situation became more sensitive after their coaching partnership ended in December 2025. They had spent 7 years together, beginning when Alcaraz was still a teenager. Ferrero helped build the routines behind the joyful public image. Their separation was officially connected to contractual and internal differences, not a public collapse in their personal relationship. Ferrero later rejected claims that money was the simple cause. That explanation did not stop speculation. Social media filled the uncertainty with its own story. Some fans decided that Alcaraz wanted greater freedom from Ferrero's demands. Others blamed family influence. Another group believed the partnership had naturally reached its conclusion. None of those theories proved that Carlos had lost his ambition, but the timing made every later statement about enjoyment appear more significant. Alcaraz answered the first major test without Ferrero by winning the Australian Open. The achievement completed his career Grand Slam and challenged the idea that his structure would collapse immediately. Success should have ended the argument. Instead, it changed the question. Critics moved from asking whether he could win without Ferrero to asking how long that success could last. The wrist injury arrived during the clay season and removed Alcaraz from the part of the calendar where he had built some of his strongest memories. He missed Roland Garros, where he would have defended his title, then withdrew from Queens and Wimbledon. The absence was medical, not philosophical. A damaged wrist offers no evidence about how much somebody wants to win. Still, perception rarely follows such clean rules. Sinner remained visible while Carlos disappeared from competition. The Italian accumulated trophies, ranking strength and momentum. Alcaraz posted rehabilitation updates instead of match victories. The contrast made Ferrero's warning sound prophetic, even though motivation had not caused the injury. That is where the alarming interpretation begins to acquire emotional force. Alcaraz's philosophy works beautifully while he can compete, improvise, and feed from the crowd. Rehabilitation offers none of those rewards. Recovery demands repetitive work without applause. Progress may be measured in small movements rather than trophies. The player who draws energy from joy must find another reason to complete the difficult days. Sinner presents the opposite image. His public identity is built around routine, control, and adjustment. He can lose a painful final, examine what failed, then return with a modified pattern. This does not mean he lacks emotion. It means his competitive persona appears less dependent on visible enjoyment. That difference turns him into the perfect opposing force for Alcaraz's current test. The rivalry is no longer asking which player can produce better tennis during one final. It is asking which personality can sustain greatness when the sport stops feeling rewarding. Carlos has already proved he can survive pressure inside a stadium. His recovery asks whether he can survive uncertainty outside one. That question leads directly to the evidence social media often leaves out. Alcaraz's record against adversity does not resemble the record of a player who has become comfortable. The clearest example came in the 2025 Roland Garros final. Sinner led by 2 sets and held 3 championship points. Alcaraz was 1 point away from losing the title. He recovered, forced the match deeper, and eventually won after almost 5.5 hours. That performance matters more than an edited documentary clip. A player who no longer values winning does not keep searching for solutions under that level of physical and emotional pressure. Carlos did not protect himself from disappointment. He moved toward it, survived it, and produced one of the strongest comebacks of his career. His words after other major victories also challenged the title's literal claim. Alcaraz has spoken openly about wanting more Grand Slam trophies. He has discussed joining the greatest names in tennis history. Before Roland Garros in 2025, he described a final as an occasion centered on winning. His philosophy has never removed ambition. It has tried to prevent ambition from destroying the person carrying it. The conflict becomes clearer when his exact position is separated from the language created around it. Alcaraz does not want to spend every day calculating rankings and historical totals. He wants to enter matches with enough emotional freedom to access his complete game. Obsession can tighten the arm, narrow decision-making, and turn every lost point into a judgment about the future. For Carlos, focusing less on the final result can improve his chance of achieving it. Sports psychologists often encourage competitors to concentrate on controllable actions rather than an outcome. A player cannot directly control the trophy. He can control preparation, shot selection, recovery, and attention during the next point. Viewed from that perspective, Alcaraz's statement sounds practical. The concern appears when a process-focused idea begins interacting with lifestyle, injury, and rivalry. Ferrero was not warning against happiness. He was warning that happiness would not always arrive on schedule. Discipline must remain available on the mornings when tennis feels repetitive, painful, or unfair. Sinner's surge has ensured that Alcaraz will receive no gentle period in which to solve that problem. After Carlos won the Australian Open, he held 15 big titles compared with Sinner's 11. By July, Sinner had reached 17, while Alcaraz remained on 15. The reversal came through Sinner winning 6 of the next 7 major-level prizes counted in that category. Those figures provide the strongest reason this story matters. Alcaraz has not suddenly become a worse player. His rival has used the absence to change the shape of their race. Carlos moved from 4 ahead to 2 behind during a short section of one season. Injury created the opening, but Sinner's consistency turned it into a shift of power. Sinner also expanded his game during that period. His drop shot, once associated more strongly with Alcaraz's variety, became a weapon on important points. He used it effectively during Wimbledon against Djokovic and Zverev. That development carried a symbolic message. Sinner was no longer winning only through clean baseline pressure. He was borrowing creative elements from the player currently unable to challenge him. For Alcaraz, watching that evolution must be uncomfortable. The rival who once represented the opposite style is becoming more complete. Sinner can maintain his disciplined foundation while adding variety. Carlos now needs to protect his creativity while building the routine required to survive long interruptions. Celebrity adds another layer. Alcaraz is associated with Nike, Babolat, Rolex, and Louis Vuitton. Those brands reflect his position beyond tennis. His outfits receive coverage. His appearances reach audiences who may never watch a full match. His personality has commercial value because he feels warmer and more spontaneous than the traditional sporting machine. Commercial success does not prove reduced commitment. Federer, Nadal, Serena Williams, and Djokovic handled major endorsement portfolios while competing for history. The relevant issue is the pressure created when a player becomes a global product. Every trip can be presented as distraction. Each luxury item becomes a supposed clue. Normal attempts at balance are treated as evidence in a case against his professionalism. The documentary increased that scrutiny by allowing viewers inside conversations that normally remain private. Ferrero's discomfort gave critics an authority figure they could cite. Carlos's desire for freedom gave supporters a human reason to defend him. The audience did not simply watch a training disagreement. It chose between two definitions of greatness. Sinner's supporters could point toward the scoreboard. His system appeared stable, and the trophies kept arriving. Alcaraz's fans could point toward their player's achievements and argue that his unconventional balance had already produced historic success. Both groups found evidence because the rivalry contains enough truth for each interpretation. Yet the title asks why the statement is the most alarming sign. The answer cannot be that Alcaraz has stopped wanting victory, because his career contradicts that conclusion. The real alarm comes from the possibility that his method of sustaining ambition is more fragile than Sinner's method. Joy depends partly on circumstances, pain can interrupt it, long absences can weaken it, constant public judgment can make the sport feel smaller rather than exciting. Alcaraz has admitted that difficult periods previously caused him to lose enjoyment on court. His 2024 Indian Wells victory mattered because he rediscovered that feeling after months of frustration. Discipline is designed for those periods, which explains Ferrero's choice of words. He had watched Carlos closely enough to know that inspiration could not be guaranteed. His warning was not an attack, it was the observation of a coach who understood both the brilliance and the maintenance required to preserve it. The separation between them makes the warning more powerful now. Samuel Lopez and the remaining team must help Alcaraz develop a structure that still feels like his own. Copying Sinner would be a mistake because Carlos's instinct is not a weakness to remove. Over-controlling him could reduce the creativity that makes him dangerous. Allowing complete freedom without a stable routine could create another problem. His comeback therefore requires balance at a level more difficult than anything shown in the documentary. He must respect the wrist without becoming afraid of it. Training must remain demanding without turning tennis into punishment. The historical race can provide motivation, although thinking about it constantly could recreate the pressure he wants to avoid. Sinner will be waiting with a stronger resume than the one Alcaraz left behind. The big title's lead has changed. Wimbledon belongs to the Italian again. Other players have also advanced during Carlos's absence. Returning will not restore his old position automatically. That challenge may awaken the competitor critics believe has gone missing. Alcaraz has often produced his most memorable tennis when somebody places a difficult problem in front of him. Djokovic controlled Wimbledon until Carlos defeated him there. Sinner held championship points in Paris until Carlos escaped. Completing the career Grand Slam required overcoming the major that had resisted him. This is why declaring him finished would be premature. The same emotional nature that appears vulnerable can become explosive when the right target appears. Sinner's surge gives him that target. Ferrero's warning gives him a question to answer. Rehabilitation supplies a test that cannot be solved through talent alone. The truth behind the quote is less scandalous than the headline, but more interesting for the future. Alcaraz was describing the mindset that allows him to play freely. He was not renouncing trophies. The alarming sign comes from everything surrounding the statement: a major injury, an extended absence, a former coach's concern, a changed support structure, and a rival who has refused to pause. Carlos now has to prove that enjoyment is not the only fuel available to him. If joy returns immediately, his game may recover with it. Should the comeback become slow or painful, discipline must carry him through the section where applause cannot help. Sinner has already delivered his part of the story. He turned Alcaraz's absence into titles and transformed a 4-trophy deficit into a 2-trophy lead. His answer has been visible on scoreboards throughout the season. Carlos's answer remains inside rehabilitation sessions that fans cannot fully see. That makes his next appearance larger than one comeback match. It will show whether his movement is free, whether the forehand trusts the wrist, and whether difficult moments still bring out his smile. More importantly, it will reveal how he responds if the first tournament does not end with a trophy. Great careers are rarely defined by the period when everything feels easy. Their shape emerges when the original source of confidence disappears. Alcaraz's early career was powered by discovery and joy. The next stage may require patience, routine, and the willingness to continue when the game offers no immediate reward. Perhaps Ferrero's warning will eventually look unnecessary. Carlos may return, rediscover his freedom, and resume his rivalry with Sinner as though the interruption never happened. His Australian Open victory already proved he could succeed after changing coaches. His history against Sinner proves that the Italian's best level does not frighten him. The alternative remains possible. Persistent discomfort could alter his shot selection. Lost rhythm might create impatience. Sinner's growing lead could tempt Carlos to rush the process. Those are legitimate concerns, but none proves that he no longer cares about winning. The most accurate conclusion sits between celebration and panic. Alcaraz's philosophy is not surrender. It is a high-risk method of protecting the instinct that made him exceptional. That method works when joy and discipline support each other. Trouble begins only if enjoyment disappears and no stable routine replaces it. Fans should watch the work rather than isolate the quote. His schedule, physical recovery, competitive patience, and response to early setbacks will reveal more than any documentary sentence. If he accepts an imperfect return without losing direction, the hunger remains intact. If frustration begins controlling his decisions, Ferrero's concern will become harder to dismiss. Sinner currently owns the momentum, which makes him the established force in this chapter. Alcaraz returns as the challenger despite possessing 7 major titles. That reversal gives their rivalry a new emotional shape. Carlos is no longer defending his position from a player trying to catch him. He is pursuing a rival who kept moving while he was unable to compete. The pursuit may be exactly what he needs. Joy has always appeared when Alcaraz sees possibility inside difficulty. Sinner has now created the largest competitive problem of his career. Solving it would require every part of Carlos's identity: imagination, courage, patience, and the discipline Ferrero feared might one day be tested. So the statement matters, but not because it confirms that Alcaraz has abandoned victory. It matters because his career has reached the point where words about happiness must survive circumstances that are not enjoyable. Sinner has supplied the pressure. Injury has removed the comfort. The old coach has supplied the warning. Carlos must now provide the answer. Subscribe if you want to follow what happens when Alcaraz finally returns, and tell me whether you believe his focus on joy will protect his greatness or eventually limit it.